it has come to my attention that the closer I get to the end of a book, the faster I tend to read it. It's kind of a phenomenon of momentum where as as I near the final chapters of any book that I'm reading, I kind of want to know how it ends, and I know I don't have that much more to go, so it's my inspiration for reading the book kind of ramps up, and for some reason it kind of, I don't know, it's inspiring me to like do this weird gesture thing, but yeah. So, and even more so, I found that it is the same phenomenon is true regarding whole book series, regarding whole book series. Hi friends, it's your boy Cranberry Enthusiast, and welcome back to this kind of open dialogue, fairly live stream style-esque video in which I'm really not doing much editing because I'm trying to kind of get used to the more live stream aesthetic. And yeah, and as you know from the title of this video, this is the second part of this very small, essentially, video series in which I'm kind of going over my read-through of A Series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket, the book series, for the first time. I haven't seen any of the Netflix or movie stuff yet, although I want to, and I might make another video about that when I do. But yeah, so obviously this is part 2. When I did the first part, I had only read the first 6 books, about halfway through. Now I've read all the way through book 12. I just finished book 12 of the series, and literally, so The Bad Beginning, the first book, is one of the shortest books in the series. The books kind of get longer and longer as the series goes on, but if I remember right, it took me about 2 weeks to finish The Bad Beginning, because I was reading it like incrementally and stuff, and even then I finished it. As I got near the end, as I was saying, I kind of got the momentum, and I think I read the last 3 chapters or something really quickly, but anyway, so that took me about 2 weeks to go through the first book. The last 3 books, so 10, 11, 12, Slippery Slope, Grim Grotto, and Penultimate Peril, I read in like the same time frame. So about less than 2 weeks, I've begun and finished those three books before the very end of the series, book 13, which is called The End, and very appropriately. And so I just want to take this video to kind of go over all the theories that I've talked about in the last video, see if any have been confirmed or disproven, what I kind of am feeling, thinking now, as well as talk about other ideas that I have, other notable things that came up and it's got me thinking in different directions, and also to my guesses, and things will probably be fairly vague and fairly like overarching, because I really have no idea what the last book is going to be about. It could literally go any direction in my mind. But yeah, my guess is about what the end will be, and it's the very thickest book in the series, so yeah, I am very very much looking forward to that. So we will be going through that. I have my notes here on the computer to kind of reference, so I hopefully stay somewhat on track. And before we get any further, this video is not sponsored, and this video obviously will contain notable and lots of spoilers for A Series of Unfortunate Events. So if you haven't read the book series, or if like you don't want to, and maybe you've already seen the TV show and you already kind of know a lot of notables like The Secret of VFD and various things, then so if you don't want spoilers, point being, probably shouldn't watch this video until you've read the series or watched the series for yourself, whatever you're planning on doing. So just anyway, proceed at your own penultimate peril, so to speak. So yeah, let's get started right away. So as you will recall, so I'll start by going through ideas or like theories that I had for the series that I talked about last video. So first one I have on my list here is that Sunny Baudelaire will say a full coherent sentence by the end of the series, and I am happy to confirm that yes, this is true, and especially in Penultimate Peril there were multiple times where she not only says like sentences that are like 1 to 2 words long, but she actually says, I think, like a 7 to 9 word sentence that is like completely grammatically correct and everything. So yeah, so that is very very much confirmed. Very small thing, but it's very confirmed. Next, I was guessing that each book will continue to have 13 chapters each, and so far so good. Books 1 through 12 are all like that, and so I imagine that book 13 will also have 13 chapters. So, with the one exception being, like, in the penultimate peril, there are a couple things, but they, like, in between some chapters, but they literally are called at the top, not a chapter, so we're not going to call them chapters, but anyway. Next theory, which I was feeling pretty confident about, if I remember right last time, was that Count Olaf is responsible for the fire that killed the Baudelaire parents, and it's still not yet confirmed, but it is looking more and more likely, and especially with all the other fires, and along the same lines with the I always mix it up. Quagmire, Quagmire. It's probably Quagmire. So I'm still thinking that Olaf is probably responsible, and might not be him with that particular thing. It might actually be someone associated with him, because as we've been going through these books, very much, like, man, there are so many twists and turns, and we learned that Count Olaf is not even the worst villain in the whole series. It's like there's villains everywhere. It's very depressing, but also very intriguing. So yeah, and also, again, spoiler alert, I was really happy to learn that Quigley actually survived the fire, and appears in one of the books, and well, my theory is that he's going to appear again in the end, which we'll get to that. But anyway, another thing that's, I think, important to mention is that it's not just the Baudelaires and Quagmires that have been victims of fires. There have been many families that have experienced house fires that have killed the parents, including the Snickets, which we will get to that. Or at least if I remember right, it's like all but confirmed that the Snickets were involved with that. And then the Denoments, and other. What was anyway? But the point being, this seems like a trend, and it seems like a trend of villains who used to be part of VFD, which we will get to that. So anyway, another kind of, actually, so this is related to it, it's a new theory, and based off of the last book, I want to say that the Baudelaire parents are somehow involved in the death of Count Olaf's parents. As it's revealed, Olaf is an orphan who, and his parents died by poison darts, and there's been references to the Baudelaire parents having something to do with poison darts, and then Olaf makes some remark about, like, that essentially casts the Baudelaire parents as to not being as innocent as the things would be. But I mean, that's Olaf saying things, and who knows, he seems to have a really messed up perspective on a lot of things. But anyway, let's continue here. Another theory, I was kind of fearfully convinced that Olaf was somehow going to steal the Quagmire's diamond fortune, but it's looking like not, so fortunately. There's, even though it's a series of unfortunate events, there are still fortunate things, and the absolute worst case scenario doesn't seem to be happening all the time. Another theory I had, Olaf is the guy who marries Beatrice and later kills her. Still yet to be confirmed, but still looking likely. I still wonder who exactly Beatrice is. I've wondered if Beatrice somehow was the Baudelaire's mother, Mrs. Baudelaire, which wouldn't entirely make sense, because it's basically confirmed that Lemony Snicket is not their father, and obviously his last name is Snicket, and obviously Lemony Snicket seems to have like a romantic interest in Beatrice, but then she marries someone else who I kind of thought would be Count Olaf, and we're gonna get to that exactly. But yeah, the Snicket files. I'm still. It's a question I have. What is in the Snicket files? What do they say exactly? Because we have only seen the last page 13, of course, and there's a picture of the Baudelaire parents with Jacques Snicket and Lemony Snicket. I'm assuming he's never mentioned by name, but it's like the references are really similar to ways that Lemony Snicket references himself in the narration, and so I'm basically confirmed that it's, but then, because I'm like, the Baudelaire's father, I'm pretty sure, in Penultimate Peril, if I read that scene right, in a flashback scene, he's referred to as Bertrand. And so, yeah, which then, so, yeah, I don't know. So, I can't really imagine, because it's like, I don't know. Anyway, we will continue to, figure that out, hopefully by the end of the end, but, let's continue here with our list, with my notes. Another guess I had was that Lemony Snicket will appear in person at some point in the story, and I'm happy to say that it is confirmed that he is an in-person character, basically, because his siblings have appeared, including Jacques, who died, and I'm like, that's awful. It's a small mercy to refer to a thing from the Penultimate Peril, that he dies kind of before the Baudelaires really know much about him, because then you start learning, and he's like, oh, he's this really cool secret agent type guy, and like it's kind of really depressing that he's dead now. But yeah. But I'm still hoping that Lemony Snicket will appear still in person, and I also admit too that maybe he already has, and I just haven't quite realized it. A guy who comes to mind is the mysterious taxi cab driver, who appears in The Perilous Peril, yeah, Penultimate Peril. He's not referred to by name, and he's kind of mysterious, and so anyway, he had just a guess, because I've been kind of looking, because I'm like, I really want to. I don't know why, but I really want Lemony Snicket to appear on screen. So let's continue with my old theories. Theory I had was that Beatrice isn't actually dead. She and Snicket would get together and adopt the Baudelaires at the very end. Still looking unlikely to me. I'm pretty convinced, especially considering that Jacques Snicket is for sure essentially murdered, and like lots of other people in Count Olaf's trope, other members of VFD have all died. So it's like, I'm pretty sure Uncle Monty isn't coming back, unfortunately. That being said, though, there's a reference that all the reptiles, well, first of all, it's a reference that all the reptiles belong to VFD, or were trained reptiles, but that all of them at this point in the story have died except for one, which I'm thinking is the incredibly deadly Viper. And so, yeah. Shout out how, like, this and other books I've been reading have snake characters that are kind of cast in a good light, and at some point I may actually get over my fear of snakes to some extent, which I would actually kind of like, but I definitely know it has to be something that I do very incrementally, and have to figure out, I don't know, maybe if I like have some pet worms or something at first, maybe that will help me get used to my, whatever the word is for phobia of snakes, ophidiophobia. Shout out when I searched that up on Google, and it was like, oh, what is the word for fear of snakes? And like an image came up of like an attacking snake, and it was like, really? Like, anyway, I'm not a fan of Google, but so let's get back on topic a little bit here. So before, I was divided on whether Olaf will ever face justice. I wanted to say yes, but again, I thought about the title of the series, and I was like, yeah. So as of now, I'm still unsure, but I'm also wondering, interestingly, if Olaf will have a redemption arc, especially after some moments that happened in Peril. I kind of don't think so. I think that would be too good. But anyway, it at least came to mind. I had I didn't really think this would be a thing, that Mr. Poe is working for Olaf and is part of Olaf's grand scheme. And at this point, I'm like, well, I know Olaf isn't even the worst villain in the series, and so, like, the grand scheme of things is probably not even something that he's designing. But at this point, I'm just convinced Mr. Poe is just not very observant and whatnot, and I don't think he has any malicious intent. He just is, I mean, for lack of a better term, I think incompetent, which I would argue isn't even entirely his fault. He just isn't very observant. So, yeah, but another theory I had that I thought was kind of really unlikely, but I still wondered about it, was that Lemony Snicket was actually Count Olaf in disguise, or vice versa. But I can pretty much dismiss this entirely now. Like, I didn't really think about it before, but now I'm at the point where I'm like, yeah. I had no idea what VFD meant, but and I still didn't until a couple books ago, really. But it's basically confirmed now, not 100%, but it's basically confirmed that it stands for Volunteer Fire Department primarily, but there are many things associated with the organization that also use those same initials, which is actually really cool. I remember when I first thought of the initials, I couldn't think of really any good acronyms, but now, like, I know so many, even something like, a very fine day. That fits. So that kind of covers all the theories that I've kind of had over last time. And I forgot, I meant to do this, or I was originally meaning to do this earlier, but I kind of just wanted to quickly jump through books 7 through 12 and just kind of give my overall thoughts about it. And one thing I've noticed is that it tends, for the most part, it's like each book that follows has been my new favorite book in the series, probably because I learn more with each book. But yeah, so book 7 is called The Vile Village, and it, well, I love birds, and so a big part of that book is that the Baudelaires are living in a village devoted to crows, basically, the Village of Fowl Devotees, VFD, the name of the village. And so that was really cool. I love that there's a cranberry juice reference in there, and glad that it resolved with the Quagmire, two of the Quagmire triplets, or Quagmire, that they escaped from Olaf, and so even though the Baudelaires didn't, well, I mean, they technically did too, but they weren't able to escape with the Quagmires. It at least had a fairly good ending there. I also love Olaf's detective. I'm thinking on his name now. Detective Dupe, maybe something. But the detective that he's disguised as, where he's like, it's not cool, and he snaps his fingers every time he says cool. It's not cool to not eat dessert in the morning, or whatever. So anyway, and so yeah, Vile Village is quite something. Book 8 is The Hostile Hospital, and I also found, well, there are so many funny things in all of the books, but first of all, another cranberry reference in Hospital, and there might be one in book 9 too, but yeah, I think probably, like, I don't know, my favorite part of Hospital would probably be the reveal about the Snicket file, and that the the Baudelaires finding the picture of their parents and Jacques, and presumably Lemony Snicket, and then the note saying, based on the evidence on page 9, which they don't have access to, that there may have been a survivor of the fire, which at first, like the Baudelaires, I was thinking that it was like one of their parents, which is, but as time has kind of gone on, like, now I'm kind of convinced that it might well have been Lemony Snicket who survived the fire there. But at the same time, if there was a fire and Jacques Snicket was there too, he obviously survived, so it's, yeah, now I'm even rethinking that, so I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to find out, if we ever find out, which we better find out. Yeah, so, but Hospital is kind of wild. I was happy that, I always, is it Klaus? It's not Claus, it's, I'm gonna say Klaus, and please forgive me if I'm mispronouncing it, as I probably am, but Klaus and Sunny, when they're trying to save Violet from an unnecessary surgery, how in their disguises none of Olaf's, like, hench people and stuff recognize them. And then Also, too, with like the hospital burns to the ground, and it was with that, and then okay, and so book 9, the Carnivorous Carnival, the carnival also burns to the ground, courtesy of Olaf and his gang, and so um like it's um seems very much likely that that's kind of why I'm thinking that Olaf would be kind of responsible for other notable fires in the series and stuff. So, yeah, Carnival's cool. There are lions there, which unfortunately the lion. Oh, I mean, unfortunately in some respects, because I suppose they they. Fortunately, the Baudelaires were not eaten by lions, but other people were eaten by lions. And but fortunately, uh, well, so it's like I don't know. It's Carnival was kind of one of the hardest books to read, especially where it ended at such a cliffhanger and such like when I finished that book, I was like, man, if this series actually ends in abject tragedy, I'm probably going to cry. And I've never had that type of like hopelessness in reading a book series before. So again, that's absolutely amazing. I love it despite the pain. But yeah. So Carnival is quite something else. But then Slippery Slope. Slippery Slope is where we learned that Quigley actually survived. That was cool, and we kind of learned. We learned its first reference. The VFD probably means Volunteer Fire Department, and then like the different VFD codes and stuff, and then there's of course talk about the schism of VFD. And then so yeah, unfortunately, it resolves fairly well. I was afraid that Quigley would be taken by Count Olaf, but he escaped, and the Baudelaires escaped too. Even though Quigley got separated from them, which is not the best, but then maybe it was for the best because Quigley was able to do some other things to help them later. And so, yeah, so Slippery Slope is something in and of itself as well. The Grim Grotto, which as time goes on, the Grim Grotto might become my favorite book overall, unless the end is really like, well, we'll find out. But so far, like, yeah, I would say it would probably be a cross between Grim Grotto and Penultimate Peril. But the reason why I would say Grim Grotto is because I love the character of Captain Wittershins. I love like Olaf's insane laughter phase that he's in that book, where he just says random words as he's laughing and stuff, and it's like, yeah. And then it's a underwater adventure, which is kind of cool. Sunny doesn't die, which thankfully kind of knew that, given that she appears on the cover of Penultimate Peril. So but and then it also ends with like, this was with the Baudelaires doing something that says, and it says that was like the first time they had broken the cycle of all these unfortunate events, and so I was like, we may get a somewhat semblance of a semi-good ending after all, so we're gonna have to figure that out. But so yeah, but all in all, I really like Grotto, and also Phil comes back too, like Phil. And Penultimate Peril, one thing I love about it is that it brings back so many characters. I love the fact that Mrs. Bass, so Klaus's teacher at Prefect Preparatory. I'm butchering the name again, but at the school at the Austere Academy. And that it's like, because I remember in the book it talks about later on she robbed a bank, and I was like, oh, that's probably a whole side thing. But now I think like she actually robbed a bank in terms of other things, and then like there's all these references to her robbing a bank, and then Mr. Poe is there trying to solve it, but of course he can't solve it. And then I found that absolutely hilarious. And Mr. Remora ordering 48 servings or whatever of fried banana, like the quirky absurdities, eccentricities, I love it. Anyway, but then also like the Baudelaire's conversation with Kit Snicket, and then just also too the way that it kind of, I don't know, you really, in a crazy way, you see the Baudelaires maturing, and it's kind of like really, I mean, the book kind of focuses on that quite a bit too, and that they're not the same people that they were at the very beginning of the series, which would make sense. But yeah. So anyway, Penultimate Peril. I greatly enjoy that, and if the book ended right there, well, or the series ended, I mean, the book ended right there at the end, but if the series ended right there, that's, well, I will get into that, because that's like my fear was that the series would end the way that Penultimate Peril ended, but thankfully we have this other huge book called The End to go through. So now that we've kind of jumped randomly through the books in a very brief recollection, or very long, depending on your definition of brief, I guess, or your understanding of the length of time, let's go through some more questions and like theories I have. So one thing, I'm like, what's the deal with the VFD schism? So it seems pretty obvious there was a schism where the organization, the volunteer fire department, split, and there were people who seemed to stay true to the noble cause that VFD stood for, putting out or literal and metaphorical fires, which someone references, I think, in one of the books, and then people who find it more profitable and more fun, so to speak, to set fires. and so I'm wondering, did the split occur just because there were people who wanted to do villainous stuff, or did like some other notable event happen that was like really divided people? And so I'm just curious to know the history of the schism. Also, the secret of the Sugar Bowl, I'm kind of surprised it hasn't been found, but I mean, at least it hasn't been found by the villains as far as we know. Maybe that, anyway. But like, what could be in the Sugar Bowl? And I was like, I really don't have an idea. Is it a copy of the Snicket Files? Is it, like, I really don't know. Another thing I wonder about was the mysterious submarine that's seen in Grotto, so not the Queequeg or Olaf's octopus submarine, which another thought, Olaf referenced that the hook-handed man and his sister Fiona took it over, but then it seems like they're also fighting the Quagmires too, so it's like, are they on, what side are they on now, and what's, yeah, but the mysterious submarine, the one that, if I remember right, it appears on the sonar screen like a giant question mark. Yeah, and then my first guess was that it belonged to the nameless man and woman, the man with a beard but no hair, and the woman with hair but no beard. Which really, like, they seem to be worse villains than Olaf, and so, but I'm really not sure. Like, and I'm very intrigued, because I have a feeling it's going to come back, especially with the Baudelaires being at sea again, so, another question I have is, who will survive the fire at the Hotel Denouement? If I'm pronouncing that right, I'm probably not. Denouement. And it seems like Esme, Squalor, and Carmelita Spatz will probably die, given that it says the Baudelaires will never argue with them again. But then I'm wondering, what about Justice Strauss, who's in there? Jerome Squalor? Mr. Poe? A bunch of Olaf's hench people and stuff? Like, is everyone gonna die in the fire, or some people? And then I was like, well, maybe the people who believe the Baudelaires when they were warning everybody about the fire will be, so it's like only the volunteers will survive and the villains will all die in the fire. But at the same time, I'm like, I kind of don't think that would be the case. Plus also, like, Justice Strauss was on the roof and the whole building is going up in flames. Does she even have time to get out of the building? Which kind of along with that, I really don't know how I feel about the Baudelaires' involvement in the destruction of the hotel and whatnot, and with various other things. On one hand, like, I don't really see much better options for them to do, but I'm also like, was that really the only option? Like, obviously, even when they're kind of seeming like they're working with Olaf at the end, they're not, in the sense that they have a different motive. Like, you know, Klaus is okay with letting Olaf into the room because he's already figured out that Olaf um, isn't going to get the sugar bowl because it's not in there, or at least he thinks, and he turns out to be right, so he was thinking good. And so he kind of does it in a sense to like kind of save Justice Strauss, which I'm probably mispronouncing her name too, but anyway. Then like with Violet knowing that, yeah, if they don't escape with Olaf, most likely they will never, you know, that's just going to be, they're probably just going to go to jail, because given that the other two villains are also judges on the high court, and so it's like the whole justice system is immensely corrupt. Yeah, it's just, I'm like, can I like when Justice Strauss is like wanting them to go back with her, which who knows if they could even at that point have, because the building's literally burning down. But I'm like, yeah, I mean, I don't think that's really a good idea. Then, and I know like Sunny wasn't intentionally like trying to hurt her when like she bit Justice Strauss's hand to make her like go of the ship so that they would escape off the building. But at the same time, I'm like, ugh, just, yeah, it hits a little bit different. Which at the same time, and of course, Sunny's, even her idea, yes, the building should be burned down. And true, she had the idea of being able to warn everybody, and I mean, at that point, you know, like, you have to kind of think of everything that's going on, and yeah, the people who were coming on Thursday to the hotel need to have known that it's not safe to be there, and so, and burning the hotel was kind of like the signal, basically. And so anyway, so all that to say, I really hope they don't somehow end up joining Olaf. I don't think so. I don't think it's likely. I find it really implausible, but still, I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Again, not that again, were I in such situations, I probably would have done what they've done, or maybe even worse. Like, it's so many like hard decisions to make and things where it's like you just don't know. So anyway, it's very interesting. But now that I've been talking for a lot longer than I thought this video would be, but anyway, let's get to my guesses for the end. The 13th book, the last book in the series. So here are my guesses overall. First of all, and a lot of these are vague, I'll warn you, or fairly general, I should say. First one being, most every major mystery shall be resolved. And I say most because I don't think every single thing will be resolved. And already there are things where we kind of know we're not going to know. Like, for instance, we don't know what happened to the two white-faced women at the end of Slope. And it's very clear that Lemony Snicket doesn't know. And so it's like, I don't think we're going to figure that out. But most every major mystery, I think, would be resolved. So, like, I think we're going to figure out who Beatrice is. I think we're going to figure out where Lemony Snicket plays into all this, whether, or, you know, how Count Olaf's parents died, how the Baudelaire parents, who was responsible for the fire, which I think it's Olaf. We're going to figure that out, I'm very sure. So, stuff like that. And I'm also very sure that the Quagmires shall appear again, reunited, as it seems like they've kind of been reunited already. And I think that a bunch of other characters, Hector, Kit Snicket, Fiona, the Hook-Handed Man, Captain Wittershins, will all appear again, or at least be referenced in some way that we know kind of what happens to them, so to speak. I have a feeling that also, too, that there are going to be a lot of notable deaths in the book, most likely, but maybe not. I'll just assume that a lot of people are going to die, and if not as many people die, call it a wonderful, fortunate thing. I also think that the mysterious submarine introduced in Grotto will be revealed, and I also think that, so I think that there will be a definite end, that will be like, okay, like, sure, you could add on to it, but I think it'll be like, probably like the Lord of the Rings, where it kind of just ends quite satisfactorily, things are kind of resolved, it's a definite end of the series, but at the same time, I don't think that it's going to be the best ending I can imagine for it. I do think that the Count Olaf saga, so to speak, will come to an end in some way, whether that means he's arrested, or steals the Baudelaire fortune, or is redeemed. Those are like three possibilities I see, three major ones. Of course, a fourth possibility is that he doesn't like, the saga doesn't come to an end, that he escapes somewhere else and is lurking somewhere, and Lemony Snicket might write, maybe you've seen him as you're walking through the grocery store, or maybe he lives somewhere in the mountains, or maybe, you know. So I do think that the Count Olaf saga will come to some sort of end, whether, again, with those three different ideas, being arrested, succeeding with the evil plot, or being redeemed. One of the three. Yeah, and I have a hard time thinking of which would be the most accurate. I suppose he could also die. I kind of don't think Count Olaf will die, which is a weird anyway. But I'm kind of at a complete loss. I feel like any of these could be kind of just as equally possible, even though I kind of don't think he's going to be redeemed. I really don't think he's going to be arrested, but I also kind of don't think he's going to eventually steal the Baudelaire fortune, so maybe he's just going to die, or maybe, like, disappear. So, anyway. I don't know. It's like, 'cause at the same time, it's weird how, as I've gone through the series, yes, Olaf is a very despicable person, and is done and is doing horrible things, and doesn't really care about anybody except himself, really. But at the same time, I'm like, there's a part of me that really wants him to be redeemed. And maybe it's just me, but, like, anyway. So, I also really hope that it doesn't end with the Baudelaires floating away into the sunset, kind of like how Penultimate Peril ended. And we just never learned what became of them after that. I can't say it won't happen, that it's like, and this is where the series ends, because we have no idea where the Baudelaires went or what happened to them afterward. Maybe they're dead, maybe they're alive, we don't know. The end. And, like, I really hope it doesn't end that way. Can't say it won't. We're gonna, like, anyway, we're gonna figure it out. Also, another guess I have for the end is that Lemony Snicket shall appear on screen, so to speak, officially, and we're gonna know that it's him, or at least know enough to know that it's him, and that, again, yeah, like, related mysteries will be revealed. But yeah, so all in all, I've been greatly enjoying the series. I'm very excited to be reading the last book, and I don't think I'm going to quite finish it today, but I'm probably going to start it here pretty soon now that I've made this video, and yeah, we're going to see what happens. So, happy reading, and see you in the next video that you watch that I am in, which it could be part 3 of this series, which should be coming out once I finish the end, and I will just kind of do a quick recap and where we go from here too, because there are other books that Lemony Snicket wrote that are related to a series of unfortunate events, so I'm probably going to start reading those afterward, and who knows, this 3-part series may actually continue into a larger book series discussion, so to speak. Never thought I would really be doing something like this, but here we are. And so, yeah, thank you all so much for watching. Have a fabulous, wacky Wednesday, if it is Wednesday. And you know what? Have one anyway, even if it's not Wednesday. Be rebellious like that. Alright, see you all later.